Good evening. I'll call this meeting of the Board of Commissioners to order. We have a workshop here Monday, December 8th from 5:15 to 6 p.m. to discuss the growth and infrastructure and other related items. The public is invited to attend and comment. At this point, without objection, we'll start off with citizen comments. I'll set if there's no objections, we can set citizen comments to 5:55 if it's needed, and then we'll get into the workshop discussion. Any objections? That's not right, is it? 5:25? I'll take that as an objection. All right, I'll open the floor if anybody in the audience would like to offer a comment. Okay, seeing none, we will close citizen comments. And Commissioner Mullally, would you like to start?
Sure.
You have the floor.
All righty. Okay, there we go. Okay, thank you for coming tonight and for tuning in. So there's been some awareness come up that we need to talk about the future of the city. So this is a proposal for a new direction, growing wisely in Mount Juliet for sustainable growth and infrastructure responsibility. It's about, creating a framework. So, and I want to say this, even though I believe the closed for business moratorium that Commissioner Hefner presented last meeting would be very bad for the city and create further budget issues, I want to thank him for bringing it because it has brought to light issues dealing with our current situation as a city. And even though we can't stop growth and development, which he said in a meeting about 3 months ago, we can look at a different direction. That's why the mayor and I have co-sponsored this work session, and it could be considered a standard-based moratorium as an alternative to the other one. So is the moratorium as presented by Commissioner Hefner on high-density, multifamily, and commercial districts a smart answer for sprawl planning vision? The short answer is usually not. A broad moratorium on high-density, multifamily, and commercial zoning almost always backfires and often accelerates sprawl rather than preventing it. So what is sprawl? Sprawl is low-density, single-use zoning, car dependency, undefined urban edge, like a boundary, consumption of land. Common features would be single-family homes on large lots. So the problems associated with sprawl: increased transportation cost and congestion, environmental impacts, economic cost, health impacts, and social impacts. So why is a density moratorium? Why a density moratorium backfires? Well, it creates more sprawl, not less. It's larger lots, more subdivisions, more miles of roads, pipes, and utilities. It raises housing costs. Lower density equals lower tax revenue per acre. It increases long-term taxpayer burdens because it requires more infrastructure. It makes traffic worse. And that's why, sorry, wrong page. The effects on housing and finances: artificially restricting supply, especially multifamily, senior housing, workforce housing, or smaller mixed-use buildings, drives up prices for everyone, including rents. Limited options for families and seniors, rising taxpayer burdens with increased demand for infrastructure, revenue shortfalls, high maintenance liabilities. Multifamily mixed use produces 4 to 20 times the tax value than low density. So traffic and infrastructure impacts. Traffic gets worse with the spread out growth as opposed to a mixed use density. Spread out land use generates far more trips per household than high density. Complete streets reduce congestion and improve safety. A smarter alternative is a strategic, targeted pause and fix. Instead of banning density, cities use tools such as pause and fix on certain developments. That's why this could be considered a standard-based moratorium, not a blanket ban on several zoning districts. Public Works has confirmed that sewer and stormwater does fund future maintenance needs already. The FIS for major rezoning, this protects taxpayers without banning housing options. If the development fails the long-term cost revenue test, it must be redesigned or denied. The ICC is set measurable thresholds for road, sewer, stormwater, EMS response times. If a project strains the system beyond the threshold, pause it until capacity exists. So we want to encourage the right kind of density. What we should want is dense value, not dense housing. This reduces sprawl and increases revenues without overwhelming infrastructure. Walkable downtown district and other walkable communities, McFarland, Golden Bear, and Providence Central are great examples, including would be the one that's on the agenda tonight, which is the Courtyards, which is a senior living, but it also has commercial, and it would be a walking development. It's the Courtyards at McFarland. So those are great examples. Planning and Public Works already support alley infrastructure. So really the conclusion would be the SMART strategy. A density moratorium is not a smart tool for sprawl control. A pause on certain things can happen intelligently if the goal is to improve planning outcomes. Growth must pay for itself for the long term. Infrastructure burdens comparison. So you can see in the blue, sprawl versus compact development or walkable communities. As our last budget showed, sprawl is not sustainable. Now is the time to look at another direction. A maintenance cost curve over 40 years is conventional development versus fiscally responsible development. If a particular development is a net negative or a net positive for the city long term. So, you know, when we look at projects, we can look at the long term and decide if that is something for the future, if it's net negative or net positive. So just as a side note, looking into Franklin's government and how they fund infrastructure, for example, I think at the very least it could be a model for us to consider and look at our long-term needs so the burden doesn't fall back on taxpayers. Again, the sewer and stormwater are already implementing future needs. I had a meeting with them. Franklin also has impact fees for their parks for long-term maintenance. There are many slides that dive deeper into this strategy. We can go on if you want, but I'm going to stop or pause here since we don't have much time for it. So having said that, the city has been proactive on many things. Overall, this city is a great place to live and raise a family. Obviously, there are many things the city has gotten right over the years because people still want to move here. I just think it's time to plan for a future with less infrastructure demand that has a framework that protects taxpayers and strengthens the city's sustainable future. So I'm going to pause here for discussion, input.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. I will say for me, when I first started looking at this topic of sustainability for future plans when it comes to growth, and I know the term growth Ponzi scheme has been thrown around a number of times, and I've said it from the table a number of times too. And I think what you're referring to is the trap a lot of cities get into is you prove new growth, or a neighborhood, for example, comes in, it's approved. You collect a lot of one-time fees from those. The developers bless us with that new infrastructure. It doesn't cost us a dime. because they build it all out, and then we get the joy of maintaining it going forward. And there's sometimes not a lot of questions asked as how much is that going to cost? At what point are those roads going to have to be versus how much do those houses contribute in terms of funds? And what I would do, and I'll back up. When I first started looking at this is when 2021, maybe it was, when we started looking at the urban growth boundary. And I'm looking at Jennifer Hamblin. If 2021 sounds right, correct? It took about a year, 18 months to get through it. Somewhere in that period, my mindset changed dramatically over that. During 2021, we first started looking at the urban growth boundary. And the traditional model of a city is you grab everything you can get, you sit on everything you have, and then that's your model for going forward. And that works well for cities to some extent. You build a neighborhood, you get the one-time fees from it. Those roads come due for paving. The sewer's got to be maintained, the sidewalks, the curb and gutters, all that stuff has to be maintained. You get into a tight budget, or you see your budget dwindling a little bit. Somebody else comes up just outside the city and says, hey, annex this. You annex that, you put another neighborhood in there, you get those one-time fees. Those one-time fees go in there to cover the other neighborhood that was built about 10 years ago. And the problem repeats and repeats and repeats. So I started looking at this, and when the urban growth boundary coming around, I was like, looked at some of the stuff out here. I was like, it changes the way I see growth as far as a municipality. There's certain things that are rural growth and need to stay in rural areas. There is a county government that manages rural areas, and we don't need to force municipal, urban type things on stuff, especially if what they're coming in and asking us for sometimes is large lots to maintain that rural lifestyle. But as we as a city have urban standards, we're going to require them to do more than the county would, which puts our back end cost even higher on this. Yet there's less people there to pay for that cost going forward. So fast forward a bit, now you're having to take care of that. So what's your next option as a municipality? You got two choices: raise taxes on everybody else, or go repeat the cycle again. So that's when I started looking at this, and when the urban growth boundary come on this thing, I was like, we as a city pretty much just did a cleanup of our urban growth boundary. We assumed very little. We asked for very little changes to that for us, the total on it. We had people come up here and it's like, you won't take my farm. I was like, I don't want your farm. It doesn't cash flow. And since then, I started sitting down with developers, and I've got my little spreadsheet. I'm not very creative at naming things, so I just called it Funwood Roads. And I asked Public Works, and these numbers are dated at this point. I said, what's it cost for a linear foot of road to take? When it comes time to take care of it, what do we need to have? We need to have $41 a linear foot. The road's lifespan is 14 years. So I have to collect $2.93 per linear foot of road to make it work. Then I said, what about sidewalks? Well, that costs a little more. That's $56.20 per linear foot. But that's got we're typically looking at a 30-year lifespan. So that's $1.87 I need to be collecting. But we put sidewalks on both sides of the road now. So got the same problem on the other side. So another $1.87. Now, if you got a house on both sides of the road, that works a little better. But if you only got a house on one side of the road, you're in a deficit already. Now, what about curb and gutter? We want to get 50 years of life out of a curb and gutter is the number I've got. I've got $85 per linear foot that we need to collect. So that comes out another $1.70 per year. So I'd ask developers, and I sometimes get amazed. They had no clue how many feet of linear roads that they plan to put in. And I'm like, I don't know how you budget this thing. But I have one here, for example. It was 191 lots, 8,942 feet of linear road footage on that. So I used that number for my road, sidewalk, curb, and gutter. The neighborhood should have an estimated population of 480 based on this. So at the time, the property tax was 11 cents. State street aid was $35 per head. So when I worked that out, I needed to collect $8.38 per linear foot of road to make the cash flow on it. That meant, in addition to, I used the state street aid at $35 a head as an offset, but I had to be collecting $302.56 per lot in basically property tax every year to even make a cash flow. And this neighborhood was actually one of the better looking ones. I've seen some where you needed to get thousands of dollars per thing. And that changed my approach to talking to developers on some. I was like, your neighborhood, there's no way it's possible to work for us. It's going to cost, if you have a 2 mile long cul-de-sac with 6 houses on it, there's no way that cash flows. You can't, we can't, those 6 houses have never covered that road. You're going to have to bring this proposal back with private roads if you want me to even take a look at it. So that's some of the journey on this. And then Commissioner Mullally has started looking into what other cities are doing on this. And what I'm talking about, it's not a mystery at all. There's a program that I was made aware of around 2020, 2021. It's called the Strong Towns Movement. They've done all the research on it. They'll show you how much it costs. They'll show you the cities are failing. And why this is not going to work long time with the sprawl in this thing. There's books written, there's podcasts on it. The studies are available. They're all out there on it. The math is there, and I appreciate your efforts to pull this together on it. I've been getting comments now for a few years. You're the only elected official I've ever sat down to look at a project on, and for a residential project, and you whip out an Excel sheet. They said we don't typically get that. So anyway, I'll open the floor if anybody else has got any comments. Vice Mayor.
First of all, great job going over the detail. I really appreciate it. I know it's been whispers through the last couple of years on this topic here. So with your research, you said you sat down with Franklin. Is that correct? Or
No, I didn't sit down with them.
You
I
were just
was
researching?
explored. They have a great website
Uh-huh.
that goes in great detail and explains a whole lot and what they've been doing since the 2000s. And I can't remember the city planner's name, but he's done a phenomenal job, I think. So I just thought, well, that's a good model. And then on social media, a lot of people bring up Franklin as an example and Brentwood and other areas. So then I started looking at their governments and what they do, and as far as impact fees and how they do their infrastructure and kind of thing. So that's one reason I thought that was a great example. So I included that.
So the way our city's currently, because just a couple of years ago, we agreed to go ahead and vote on the way that the zoning is going to be for downtown. Is that similar to what Franklin already has in place, or are we going to have to reconsider that? Again, I haven't, seen what they've done. So,
Well, they have a
go to the
little
website.
advantage because they already had the historical district downtown.
I know.
We don't have that. Lebanon has an advantage because they've got a square and,
Yeah.
they can build from that. So the ones that already have that have a real advantage. I know that when I came here 6 years ago, that was the first thing I learned is that the city for decades has been wanting the downtown district. And I know that we voted on, half mile this way and that way on that. And so it's just, I think where we need to change our focus rather than just keep spreading out.
Sure. So for example, with these projects that are coming up, so the data that we have currently, have you worked with staff on what we have currently in the pipeline to what hasn't been built yet? You know what I mean? So like all these projects that are coming in for 2026 and in these last couple of weeks, versus what's been approved over the last couple of years that still hasn't been either fully finished or they're still in the process. How far off are we, from the numbers that you're seeing?
Well, I have not sat down with them yet.
Okay.
This just since
This is
this
just the
moratorium
first
thing came up.
Yeah.
I've just been, I spent a lot of time on social media trying to put out a fire and help people understand that larger lots aren't where it's at.
No, I
That's
agree.
what they want. They want larger lots, and it's just not sustainable, as we see in this past budget. So we've got to do something different.
Can I add something? Say larger lots are not sustainable. They're not sustainable for an urban development.
Yeah.
You can do larger lots in under rural standards where you're not doing curb and gutter and sidewalks on both sides and that stuff. You've got a lot less overhead as far as maintaining that infrastructure.
Yeah, and the private streets, that's like
And
you
that
said.
always helps
Yeah.
too. But there's been two that just blew the numbers out of the water. I couldn't even calculate how much it was going to cost taxpayers on it to do it. I guess the biggest one was it Traymore?
Yeah,
The one up
Traymore.
Bender's Ferry, where we had to go way out there, take in thousands of feet of road and assume it under this. And I think it was like 300 or ish houses to pay into that. And then that from us, because the people at this table, and this is just general mindset, I guess, information of it. We now inherit the budget, and since it passed and got built, we've now got to pay for all that. As when I say we've got to budget it. It's falling on the taxpayers, obviously, to cover the stuff they're widening that road, the utilities, getting fire protection miles out of town, and the police officers that go out there. All that's got to be covered by us. So now we've got something hanging way out there, and that's what I meant by planting our flag when I've used that phrase before. It only makes financial sense to this board when you have something hanging way out there is to infill and develop everything between your existing city and the thing that's hanging way out there to help cover the cost of all of those new streets that we're taking on that, help offset the cost of the utilities on it. So it puts a future problem on the board. Do you expect the people that live in the city already to cover all that cost, or do you infill more urban type developments along the way to offset the cost? And it's just a math problem at that point. And there's two answers. The existing people pay more to cover that, or you infill it to offset the cost along the way of those utilities and infrastructures and roads. And that leads to discussions about schools being crowded. And
which was just on
Yep.
this
Mhm.
last meeting with Luttrell. He, obviously that was something else I was just wanting to bring up as well as the schools, because I know that was a big conversation. It's already hit social media. It's amazing how we've had developers go ahead and meet up with him. And now all of a sudden we're hearing that, we're topping out on schools. We're at 98% and 86% and so forth. So we're getting very close to now they've got to find additional land and school. So, and with
And-
that, you can't find teachers.
Yeah. And one thing we do too, when development comes forward, we do ask them to provide for us a capacity at each of the 3 schools that they'll impact. So they do bring that information.
Yep.
And like we've mentioned before, the way the schools work, according to the director, once a particular school reaches 85% capacity, they start going out and looking for more land, and it starts the process. So that's how that works.
Yeah, and there's certain things we do here that either help or put burden on the school. If you put burden on the school, you want whatever you're building to offset that cost. Of course, they get the adequate facilities tax from that to help offset some of the capital cost on it. But the employees and the operation cost and everything else along the way has to be covered as well instead of the one-time fees off of it. That's why certain neighborhoods, like if you do an age-restricted neighborhood for Del Webb, for example, pay all the same taxes to the school system, but it's a very limited load on the school system. So they make a big difference based on what we're approving and not approving here.
So Jennifer, just to kind of be respectful of the time, so moving into the staff conversations, I don't think this is going to be the last conversation here for, this type of workshop, but how soon do you think, I guess this may go back to staff as well. So how soon do you think we can get these numbers of what we have currently in the pipeline and what's the effect? Because that's going to be a concern. I mean, I was just talking to a developer tonight or earlier this afternoon about, not seeing a big concern here, but it is a topic, especially when you're, going to be affecting the schools and,
Yeah.
and, getting the infrastructure. So it's a good topic. So I appreciate you pulling all this together. Do we have a timeline? Just, what, by mid-January, you think that's a feasible time that we can be able to
Well-
at least maybe work back towards this
What's
conversation?
the actual question?
So the question is pulling together the data of what's, currently in actually in the pipeline of the development that's either in progress or that's already started to pull permits. Because, for the folks that have already, let's say, purchased the land, it's already been rezoned, but it hasn't, I'm like, there's no permits. So that could be sitting there for years. But what's already in the pipeline with codes, that could be able to help us out. So at least give us an idea.
Yeah, that's important to know, but if it's already approved,
Sure, I know.
it's already approved.
Correct.
Guess I'm thinking about, and did you have any suggestions or what any of your research showed how other cities are doing this? Are they tackling it in the approval process, I assume?
Mhm.
I mean, I don't guess that's how you decide if you're approving it, but it's an information piece that the decision makers need.
Well, yeah, and one thing too, when they come forward, of course, this would have to be done at planning way before it ever comes here, in public works level, but, consider your development as they come. Is it going to be a net negative or net positive for the long term? And as you can see, this is spans out over 40 years here. So I think it would be good if we started asking that question. I know that we approve a lot of development to bring taxes in, sales tax, and which is good because city needs. So I think it's worth studying more and getting with staff and to discuss it further.
Yeah, that's part of the decision making too on the annexation question is really the cost of the maintenance going on, whether we want to annex it in the first place. A lot of the stuff with sales tax, and I know myself and the city manager have talked about this a lot. If we annex it in here, if we do not annex it, we're giving up property tax, and our property tax is very low. It's rarely ever going to factor into the decision in any way of whether it's something I want to do or not. If I don't annex it, and you're setting out just outside the city and it develops in the county, I know where your options are to come eat dinner and where the shopping mall is. So I don't even factor sales tax into those decisions very highly. Now, you might say it's a mistake if you looked at my front porch with Amazon deliveries for the side-of-space taxes, but I don't think there's enough there. I don't know how you'd go about quantifying that, but I don't put it in the decision making at all.
We can go through the rest of the slides. It goes pretty in depth if you want, or we can save it for another work session to look into it deeper. This was just a basic summary of things that we can do as an alternative to that closed for business moratorium.
Yeah, just to kind of put onto that, we had a development that was being proposed. It's geographically kind of way outside of the city limits, and when I say way out, I'm talking measurements in miles, like 4 or 5. I don't know exactly how far it is, maybe a couple, but it's set outside of it. And that was the first time I actually started looking at the question over sewage on this as well. I've looked at things that impact the general fund, but I have a lot of questions on this one about sewage and the cost and how that made up on that one. And I think Public Works can help us out on that one, just making sure we've got more information on the decision-making process. Because right now when developments come to them, a lot of times they're looking for the answer on how do I get this development that's being proposed? How do I get them sewer access? It's not always, the answer is not always the most cost-effective way, because there may be capacity issues or there may be other things on that. So it's like, here's an alternative. I guess going forward, I'd like to know, just me speaking, I'd like to know what would be the most direct and logical way to serve it, and what options do we actually have on the table for serving it on it. Because they've been some where we've had to put like pump stations on there to get it from here to here, because there wasn't capacity to the one fed by gravity. And luckily, kind of discovered that along the process. But I'd like to know that. And I know y'all do a lot of work and to make those stuff happen and try to get people the answers they need on it. But for me going forward, I just want I want to know, are we putting more infrastructure in place than what might be naturally available if a lift station or a pump, the natural flowing pump, gravity wise, was not at capacity. I'd just like to know that going forward. That's just for me, at least. We got about 14 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to kind of scan through the,
It'd be good.
Rest
And
of
then,
the
and then you could
slides.
send it out to us, couldn't you?
yeah, sure.
That'd be great.
I mean, it's pretty in depth. It might be a little overwhelming, and it's definitely not something the city could just do overnight.
Sure.
It would take some time. It also would be costly, but I think,
But if it's going to save the city, in the long run, I mean, we're not going to put a roundabout in the middle of the, like clock towers, but we could obviously see about the walkability thing here, which is
mhm.
exactly what we're trying to accomplish, which is, why it was rezoned. So for the folks that want to ride their bicycles or walk, and obviously they're not walking, too many people's walking today. But this summer, it's still nice spring, fall, and summer to be able to have folks that have that ability to walk across the street and go get dinner as well as go shopping. So it is important to, I think, to chew on the rest of the data. So yeah, if you want to kind of high level, since there's nobody else got any questions, kind of go into some more depth.
Okay,
It may generate some more questions for me at least.
sure. We'll just scan through it. So a sustainable growth initiative that protects taxpayers and our community's high quality of life. And again, this is based on Strong Towns, the Strong Towns approach. Development must demonstrate its long-term fiscal impact. It measures the full life cycle cost of infrastructure, focuses on taking care of what we have before expansion, promotes fiscally responsible and well-planned development. So, we can't stop growth. We all know that because it's market demand. People still need housing. So you hear it on social media all the time. Responsible growth. I'm not objecting to growth. We just want responsible growth. So why sustainable growth matters? You have new residential. You have long-term infrastructure costs often exceed revenues. Fiscally responsible growth protects taxpayers, supports long-term quality of life and city services. So at some point in a sprawl, your cost far exceeds your revenues. Just a comparison, a revenue chart. This is what I was talking about before of your net negative and your net positive new residential revenue for the larger lots. Of course, too, if they're public streets, and then you have your mixed use development, which would be more of a cost positive. There's 5 key principles of the initiative. Growth must pay for itself. To get more tax revenue per acre. There you have big box store, and then you have a downtown mixed use. Protect taxpayers from unfunded liabilities. Encourage efficient mixed use development. You have your low value land use, your high infrastructure per household on the left, which is your sprawl. And then you have your compact, higher tax value, walkable, efficient blocks. So just an example where, it's walkable. Prioritize maintenance of existing infrastructure. There's an example. Now, this is smart streets. So we already have the smart streets in our comprehensive transportation plan. So that's a future plan the city has. And so we do plan for that as we go along. Infrastructure maintenance cost curve. Again, this is over 40 years. Conventional development, which would be a sprawl versus a fiscally responsible one. Stormwater and maintenance impacts. And you talk about meeting with staff. I did meet with Public Works about the sewer and the stormwater, and they felt confident that because we talked about long-term, that the costs were already figured in about long-term maintenance on that. Also, a green infrastructure reduces long-term liability. Again, Franklin has a parks impact fee. So that's a lot, our parks cost a lot of money, and putting people out there, cut the grass and what have you. So some policy tools, like we talked about before, the FIS, the ICC, developer cost recovery requirements. It's a fix it first policy, pause and fix, not stop, but pause and fix. The benefits to the community, you have stronger city finances, which benefits everyone, safer and more connected streets, lower long-term taxes, and better development outcomes. So in summary, growth is important, but responsible growth is essential. And so this is just a framework that we can look at that protects taxpayers and strengthens the city's future, which I'm concerned about, the city's financial future. So, and we're all concerned. I know we are. So anyway, that's just a little more in depth. And so if y'all want to talk about maybe having another work session at some point, and if you have any other ideas or, input.
Yeah, I would just say maybe, there's a lot to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think we'd probably just need to settle in on a couple of key points, the big hitters on that's the stuff that's easy to quantify. Like you have 2 houses and 8 miles of road. That ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
That's simple math. That's stuff that we can put in now and start working with. The other things, like you showed the downtown development versus the big box stores. And I'm very aware of what their numbers show on that. But then again, we're a city that doesn't necessarily have that downtown area. That's the revenue generations that they're talking about on it. And I know their numbers come from across the board that they're getting those from. I don't know that everybody has the 9.75% sales tax on there as well. So some of that we may have to consider it, on a case by case basis on it, but there's definitely a lot there, especially with the sprawl, the way things are built, what we're approving, and just having the information as decision makers to be able to make the right decisions with it. Anybody else? Vice Mayor?
So, obviously, cities like, Franklin, there's got to be consultants out there that could be able to help give us the ability. I mean, because even though we don't have a town square, we do have a lot of road frontage, right? And there's still the opportunity here as being a new city that we still have a lot of green space that's out there that landowners are still sitting on to capitalize on. So if there's there's that one chance that we could sit here and try and get this right, to be able to have that discussion and say, look, okay, there's a problem that's recognized, and be able to get, an opportunity to have a workshop with, some type of consultant that could be able to give us a baseline and say, hey, these are your options of what's worked with other cities. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just got to know what wheel works for our city. Right. So I guess that's the next step, is to try and find out where the success is and see who's out there. Question is where do we find them? So it's got to be somebody out in the audience or that's watching tonight, or can be able to point us in some, directions. And I would ask for staff to see what other cities are doing that's successful, and see where we can be able to, have these discussions. This ain't going to be fixed, like you said, overnight, but we all recognize there's an issue. So before the city's fully functional, I mean, like, we passed the amendment for what it looks like for what we want to see the city. Okay. Now we just need to figure out what the picture is going to look like.
Yeah.
So,
and there's a couple of people that live in Del Webb that I've talked to before that were previous planners.
okay.
One of the cities was in, I can't remember the name of it, but it was in California, and it was a good city, and the planning and the infrastructure was great. And he was explaining the process of how they went about it. So, they also helped me realize some things. So
That's great. Well, appreciate you, Commissioner, and thank you so much for sharing with us.
Commissioner Giles, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think that there's a lot to this. And I also think that it's the responsibility of the city too, to be fiscally responsible for any kind of funds that we take in. I think there could be a lot of fees up front if it's legal, or when it becomes legal, that then it's our responsibility to manage that money and put some of it in for infrastructure for the future and put some of it in for the repair right now, and see how that grows and have that report that Dana gives us that shows us where that money is and what it's done. So, I think it's a two-way street on that.
Mhm.
But thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Sure.
All right, if there's nothing else, we can, without objection, no objections, we're adjourned. We will reconvene at 6:15 for a public hearing and our regular meeting at 6:30.